Hey sewers! I'm here today to give you a quick tutorial on sewing hems. I'm going to bring you down to a dress that I've been working on. And whenever you're sewing pants, a dress, or a skirt, you're either going to do a facing or you're going to sew a hem. So I'm going to show you right now what you do to sew a hem. You will probably need a little ruler so that way your hem is even all the way around. And you should get your iron ready. I have my iron right over here. Get it heated up and ready so you can get ready to press. So you need to determine the size of your hem, the length of your hem. For me, I'm going to fold it over at a 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna measure it at a 1/2 inch in one place. Fold it over. And then I'm gonna iron and press that down. And as I'm pressing it down all the way around, I'm just gonna keep checking with my ruler along the way to make sure that I'm a 1/2 inch all the way around. So I'm gonna take you over to my ironing area so you can see what that looks like as I'm ironing. Okay, make sure that whatever you're hemming is inside out right now. And in the sewing world, what I've learned is that it's also called right sides are facing in. So my right side is in, and the wrong sides are out. And I can tell that because the seam is a little open right here. So I'm doing mine at a 1/2 inch. I'm gonna measure that right in the middle or wherever you measure it out, about a 1/2 inch. And then you get your iron and you start pressing that down and folding it at a 1/2 inch all the way around. Do a little piece at a time and then rotate it, remeasure, just double check that you're still at a 1/2 inch and continue to iron all the way around. So I'm going to do that all the way around and then I'll come back and show you the next step. When you're sewing your hem around, you're going to notice your seam line coming up too. Here's my seam line right here. Check to make sure that wherever your seam is facing, so mine is facing to the left because that's the way I ironed it earlier. Make sure that when you fold it over, the seam is still facing to the left. If you don't pay attention to that, you're accidentally going to fold it the wrong way. And you'll see like a little bulky area right here because the seam is facing the wrong way. So I'm going to come in a little closer so you could see what I'm talking about. Here the seam is flipped the wrong way, but before I bring up that hem, I want to make sure that the seam is facing this way. And then I'll press it up and make sure that it's still all facing the same way. Okay, so I've ironed it up. Here's what it looks like. A 1/2 inch all the way around my entire dress, right? Now, you don't have to worry about zigzag or any kind of finish because you're about to fold it again. So you have to determine how much you want to bring up in your hem. For me, I'm going to measure out, I don't even need to measure it out because I'm going to do actually just another 1/2 inch. So for me, I'm just gonna fold it right over again. So now it's a double fold. And as you can see, when I fold it over again, it closes everything up nicely. And I will be sewing that after this next step. For you, sometimes you want a larger hem. Sometimes you want a larger hem. And maybe you want it to be 1.5 inches. So you would measure 1.5 inches from the bottom, mark that spot, and fold it up. So maybe your hem would look something like this, a little bit wider. It's really up to you and how you want the bottom of your hem to look like. I want mine to be pretty thin. So I'm just gonna fold mine right over because I already know it's a 1/2 inch because I measured it out earlier. And I'm gonna press that now. So I'm pressing those seams all the way around the whole dress, and we'll be right back. A helpful tip is to add a little pin at the seam line just to make sure that things don't move around. So as I'm ironing, this is my second fold now. I'm ironing a little bit at a time. And then I'm adding a pin every now and then just to make sure that everything stays in place. Okay, once you're done, don't forget to turn off your iron. I always remember to do that so I don't burn myself later on. Here's what my hem looks like. I measured out a 1/2 inch, pressed it once, flipped it over at another 1/2 inch, and pressed it again, and added little pins every couple of inches just to hold that hem in place. Because now we're going to bring it over to the sewing machine. And when you're sewing, you're going to use a straight stitch. And I'll show you in just a moment what that looks like too. But your straight stitch should be very close, as close to the edge as you can. That gives it a really clean finish. Now, as a beginning sewer, that was really hard for me to do. So it's okay if you're not really close. It's okay if you're like right about there. Do you see where that line might be? That's okay too. So the reason why you don't add a straight seam right here in the middle is because this will start to move around and you want it to be as flat as possible. So I'm going to bring you over to my machine to show you what that looks like. All right, I've got it set up, but I want to show you what I just did too. I'm using a very basic sewing machine. You might have a fancier one, but if you happen to have mine, I'm doing a straight stitch, and this is just right in the middle. This is where I usually stitch. If I'm moving it here to a wider stitch, that's because I'm basting, and basting is when you're just holding things in place to try something on maybe, and you don't want to sew it properly just yet. If I'm moving it here to the smaller stitch, it's maybe because I want something to be really tight and I don't want it to come undone. But typically I'm here, right? So remember how I was telling you, you want to stitch as close to that edge as you can get. Now I'm going to remove this for a second so I can show you what my measurements look like. Where this circle is right here, that's a 1/2 inch for me. And I've noticed in a lot of sewing tutorials and a lot of sewing patterns, you sew at 5/8 of an inch, which is right here. So this is 4/8, this is 5/8. 3/8 is also really typical. So this is where I'm normally working with. So what I'm trying to do with my hem is line up my dress at the 5/8 mark. Do you see how the edge is right there on the 5/8 mark? You could also line it up at the halfway mark and give yourself a little bit of room to make a mistake. I'm gonna really go for the 5/8 because I want it pretty close to the edge of my dress. And then I put the foot down, and when I put the foot down, you can see, let's see if I can get in there a little bit more so you could see where it's lined up. It's really close. I'm sorry, I know it's kind of hard to see. There it goes. It's really close to the edge of my fabric. Here's what it would look like if I came in at 1/2 inch. That's about 1/2 inch. Do you see how it's a little bit further in on the hem? But I'm trying again to get it really close to the edge. So I'm going to scoot it on over to 5/8 of an inch. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, sorry. And then you could also see that where I'm starting is really close to a seam line. I like to start really close to a seam line and end close to a seam line. So you're gonna, before you even start sewing, bring your needle down and check to see, am I even sewing on the hem? It looks like I'm a tiny bit off the hem. So I'm gonna use 2 hands and come right back because I need 2 hands to put this down in the right spot. Okay, I have it here. The needle is really close and the edge of my hem is just past 1/2 inch. I realize that if I bring it over to 5/8 of an inch, if I scoot it over just a little bit, it's just a little too close for comfort and I feel like it's gonna come off the hem. So you just have to kind of check to see where does it need to fall so it's right close to the edge. So I'm going to track with my eye the edge of my hem to make sure that it's always lined up with this 1/2 inch. So I'm going to bring my needle down before I start sewing and forward stitch about 2 stitches, then back stitch 1 or 2 stitches just to lock that in. And then you're going to continue sewing forward. And as you're sewing forward, you're just going to make sure that your eyes are really looking on this side to make sure that the edge of this hem is always lined up with 1/2 inch or wherever your line is going to be at. So for me, it's 1/2 inch. So I'm going to continue sewing and always tracking on this side to make sure that this side of the hem is lined up with that line. That's how you get as straight as a line as you possibly can. My eyes aren't really looking on this side, although they are checking every now and then to make sure I'm still on the hem, but I'm really tracking this. So you could see I'm not pulling my fabric. I hope you could see that. I'm not pulling it, I'm just kind of guiding it with my fingers. You don't need to go this fast. So one of my hands is on the back of my fabric, the other hand is right here towards the front, and I'm just guiding it and making sure that this stays with the 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna stop for a second and see if I could show you. So here's what it looks like. Do you see how it's pretty close to the edge right here? And I always, as a beginning sewer, I always just check to make sure, okay, are the threads coming out properly? Does everything look good? And I check the opposite side too, just to make sure everything looks good on that side. I'm gonna keep going. I'll show you just a little bit more as my hands are guiding. Also flattening it out, making sure I'm not getting any puckers along the way. Don't forget to remove your pins. Don't leave those pins in there. That eventually will just wear out your needle, and you don't want that to happen. I'm still checking this side to make sure, am I still lined up over here with that 1/2 inch seam allowance? I am. I'm going to keep going. Okay, and check again, make sure everything looks good. It's a little hard for you to see. There's my seam. Okay, I'm going to keep pressing all the way down, holding it with both your hands, judging it with your eye on this side to make sure it's always staying straight on that line. That's how you get your really straight lines on this side. I'll be back to show you what it looks like when I'm finished. Here's what my hem looks like now that I've finished sewing it. So again, I sewed it at 1/2 inch seam allowance. That means that the edge of my hem was lined up at the 1/2 inch line on my sewing machine. Now, if your stitch when you're sewing happens to come off, and maybe you accidentally sew up here or you sewed way down here, like sometimes that happens, you just kind of lose track with your eye and the seam starts to move in the wrong direction, you're gonna need a seam ripper. And the seam ripper you would use that to carefully pick out 1 or 2 little stitches and then pick out whatever you need. Whatever mistake you made, you would pick it out, clip the extra thread, and go back and sew it again. I will do a whole different tutorial on seam ripping. I'm not gonna get into that right now. Okay, so you're not done yet though. You're gonna get your iron and press that seam in just to kind of like lock it in. So you're always gonna press it after you sew anything like this. And when I'm pressing it, I am not going to do this. This is what's really tempting to do, is just fold my dress in half like this and iron both top and bottom of the dress. Don't do that. You're not really pressing this bottom part. You're really only pressing the top and just kind of, it's just a little lazy. So I'm going to open up my dress and only press one part of my dress at a time. And I'm also really pressing into that seam to flatten it as much as I can. And shift your dress all the way around, or whatever, your pants, whatever you're working with, shift it all the way around. And I'm really trying to press along where those stitches are at. Almost done. And then let's see what it looks like on the right side of the dress. This is the wrong side of the dress. Here's what it looks like on the right side of the dress. There we go. Sorry, it was a little blurry. It's a pretty straight stitch. Here's what it looks like on the wrong side. Now you can take this technique, and if you are short like I am, you probably have a lot of pants and shorts and skirts that you need to hem up. As soon as I started learning how to do this, I was fixing a lot of my clothes. I hope that was helpful for you. Please leave comments if you have any questions, or reach out to me on Instagram. You can find me at I am sewing Sin on Instagram. I'm going to start making more of these tutorials. So today we just did learning how to hem. And if you need help with other beginners tips like this, keep an eye out because I'll be adding more videos soon. Oh my gosh, look. My husband was making fun of me because as a sewer, he's like, I'm surprised you have a hole in the dress that you're wearing right now. I need to work on that. So I'll see you again next time. Thanks for joining me.